In 1590, a Catholic gentleman died in his prison cell at Chester Castle, not from plague, starvation or age, but from a violent blow with a pitchfork. The killer? His own gaoler. This is the true story of John Hocknell, a recusant, a prisoner of conscience, and a victim of murder. Let's delve into this grim but fascinating tale from the final decade of Elizabeth I's reign. Hi, I'm author and historian Claire Ridgway, and today we're exploring a shocking case of Tudor true crime. The murder of a Wirral gentleman imprisoned for his Catholic faith. And possibly something stranger still. Please remember to like and subscribe if you love tales from Tudor history. The protagonist of today's true crime story, John Hocknell, sometimes recorded as Hockenhull, was part of the gentry in Prenton on the Wirral Peninsula in Cheshire. He was the eldest son and heir of William Hocknell of Prenton and Margaret Hurlston, and like many landowners of his class, his family connections were extensive. He married his cousin Margaret Hocknell, and together they had 6 children. But John's life took a very dark turn in the 1570s and 1580s, when his faith and refusal to conform to the Elizabethan religious settlement marked him out as a target. To understand Hocknell's fate, we need to talk about recusancy. After the English Reformation, Elizabeth I's 1559 Act of Uniformity required all subjects to attend Church of England services. Those who refused were called recusants, from the Latin recusare, meaning to refuse. Most recusants were Catholics who remained loyal to the Pope and the Catholic Mass. At first, recusants were fined, but over time, especially after events like the Northern Rebellion and the arrival of Jesuit missionaries and the Pope excommunicating Elizabeth I, penalties became more severe. Fines, imprisonment, land seizure, and even execution in extreme cases. And Cheshire? It had a real recusancy problem, at least from the authorities' point of view. The county's Catholic networks were strong, especially among the gentry. The Wirral in particular had multiple families, including the Hocknells, who resisted conforming to the state religion. Hocknell's troubles began as early as 1577, when he was listed as a recusant worth £10 a year in land. By 1581, he was fined and imprisoned by the High Commission for failing to appear on an unstated charge. And it spiralled from there. At the October quarter sessions that same year, he was indicted again and fined £120, a huge amount, and returned to Chester Castle. Then, in early 1582, the Privy Council ordered that he and another recusant, William Hough, be formally indicted as obstinately disobedient. He was transferred around multiple prisons, the New Fleet in Salford, then the Fleet in London. By 1585, he claimed he'd been in 7 prisons in 5 years. He was freed on recognizance, but couldn't afford the fines. At one point, he owed over £600, a crushing debt. He tried to show goodwill, offering a horse, a man, and even his own personal service, meaning he was willing to serve in the military himself if needed. This was a common way of contributing to a royal levy in times of war or crisis. But even that wasn't enough to save him. He remained under pressure and nothing seemed to keep him out of jail for long. And then came something even stranger. By the September assizes of 1589, Hocknell was back in Chester Castle. This time not just for recusancy, but for spreading false prophecies. According to contemporary accounts, he'd read a prophecy that referred cryptically to the letter G. Hocknell interpreted this as meaning that Queen Mary I had secretly borne a son named George, who'd gone abroad to fight the Saracens and died a hero. The authorities, unsurprisingly, weren't impressed. He was sentenced to 1 year's imprisonment for stirring up seditious talk. Dangerous stuff in the age of Elizabeth I, especially in a region already wary of Catholic plots. But Hocknell wasn't the only one imprisoned at Chester Castle for his beliefs. In the 1580s, the castle held a small cohort of long-term recusant prisoners, men who refused to conform to the Church of England and paid dearly for it. These included William Hoff, John Tunstall, George Brooke and Edward Holland, all of whom faced repeated indictments, fines and years of confinement for their Catholic convictions. Hocknell and Hoff were even indicted together as obstinately disobedient recusants. Many of these men had strong local ties, and their continued resistance made them a thorn in the side of the authorities. Yet, while others languished or died quietly behind bars, Hocknell's story ended very differently. In April 1590, just a few months before his scheduled release, Hocknell was dead. He died on St. George's Day, the 23rd of April, after receiving a fatal injury inflicted not by another inmate, not in a riot or escape attempt, but at the hands of his gaoler, a man named John Taylor, the underkeeper at Chester Castle. The fatal weapon? A pitchfork. Taylor was brought to trial at the April Assizes and found guilty of murder. He was hanged. Hocknell was buried on the 26th of April 1590 at Holy Cross Church in Woodchurch, near his family's estate. His widow and children were left to carry the stigma of his imprisonment and the trauma of his violent end. And his wife Margaret? Well, she was just as devout and just as determined. That same year, she too was indicted for recusancy, not attending her parish church and employing a Catholic schoolmaster to educate their children. Then in 1592, she found herself in trouble again. Her second marriage was investigated because it was believed a seminary priest had conducted the ceremony. She was fined £240. And the authorities didn't stop there. In 1595 and again in 1598, Margaret and her new husband, Edward Ravenscroft, were presented in court, this time for failing to live together. Whatever the reason, Margaret's troubles continued long after John's death. John Hocknell's case stands out not only as an example of the dangers faced by Catholic recusants, but as a brutal reminder that Tudor justice, even behind bars, could turn deadly. Was he a stubborn dissenter, a harmless visionary, or simply a man caught between religious conviction and an increasingly punitive and paranoid state? Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you've ever heard of another Tudor prisoner murdered by his own gaoler. Thank you so much for watching my latest Tudor true crime story. And if you want even more Tudor history content, including Zoom video calls with me and a monthly magazine, do check out my channel membership. I'd love to welcome you to my Tudor court.